ASUS is making a new ROG Ally, but it's not the ROG Ally 2, but rather the ROG Ally X. When you put an X after something, it sounds way better. It's like the difference between Mega Man and Mega Man X, or Malcolm and Malcolm X. So what does the X actually change? Well, first I think it'd be easier to talk about what doesn't change. First and foremost, of course, being the APU. The main APU is still very much the Z1 Extreme. And of course, the screen itself is the very same 120Hz IPS display, with variable refresh rate, of course. I've heard that some people were clamoring for OLED on their ROG Ally. But having read up on variable refresh rate and OLED panels, it seems like the two are diametrically opposed. Yes, some big OLED TVs do have variable refresh rate, but those exhibit a strange issue, especially in regards to brightness, or rather gamma. It's even to the point where Apple essentially cheats their variable refresh rate on their OLED panels on their phones, with having discrete steps of 10 Hz each. So it's not even really true variable refresh rate on your iPhone. Artanes has an excellent video showcasing OLED issues with variable refresh rates. If latest tech tips is to be believed, then it's part of why the Steam Deck OLED doesn't have variable refresh rate. The technologies are just diametrically opposed and Valve couldn't figure out a good solution. So what exactly is new with the ROG Ally X? Well, first and foremost, the battery. In this Verge article, they claim that they're not looking for 30 to 40% more battery capacity, but rather way more than that. My biggest issue with the ROG Ally ultimately was the battery life. I've tested it a number of different times with a variety of different tests against a variety of different devices. Now obviously no hard numbers were given, but they say way more than 30 to 40%. 30 to 40% extra battery life would still be a pretty hefty increase in battery. But if they're saying that it's bigger than that, then it might be a new true battery king. Let me know down in the comments below if you want me to do an ROG Ally X battery test. The next major change is that there's going to be more RAM. The current ROG Ally has 16 gigs of RAM, but they are saying the new ROG Ally X will have more RAM. How much more RAM? Well, they didn't give us any numbers once again. Part of me thinks that they're going to put in 32 gigs of RAM, but again, this is just speculation from me. The ROG Ally X will also be able to fit in a M.2 2280 sized SSD. The current Ally fits a 2230 sized SSD. It's those smaller square ones. For most users, this won't really matter, but for people that like to swap out their SSDs, this makes it easy to get an upgrade. You can buy a much cheaper 2280 sized SSD and stick it in your Ally instead of having to buy a more expensive 2230 sized SSD. The Ally X is also supposedly changing up how they do thumbsticks, opting for replaceable thumbstick modules, much like the Steam Deck. GoalieKit could, in theory, make joystick replacements for the ROG Ally X, featuring Hall effect sticks. Hall effect sticks are a godsend, and they're the key to longevity on your controller. And for those that do remember, the ROG Ally had microSD card slot issues. While my ROG Ally's card slot hasn't failed me yet, my brother's actually did, and he had to get his ROG Ally replaced. They're essentially changing where the microSD card slot goes, presumably away from the vents. Also, the ROG Ally X will be a little heavier due to the increased battery and revised grips and all of that other stuff. Oh, and it comes in black, essentially making it look like an MSI claw, which in turn just looked like a black ROG Ally. Kind of crazy, isn't it, huh? Unfortunately though, this does come at a cost. Supposedly the ROG Ally X will be more expensive than the ROG Ally original, which is in stark contrast to what Valve did with the OLED model, essentially having the OLED replace the original LCD models at their various price points, the middle and high tier, I mean. There is also one more change: the software. This isn't necessarily an ROG Ally X exclusive software, but it'll also come to the original ROG Ally as well. And it's a totally revamped and redesigned Armory crate. So among these changes, of course, are a totally redesigned interface. You can change button mapping and share it with the ROG Ally community, or use someone else's configuration. There's supposed to be a number of different quality of life improvements, but it's hard to know for certain how good it actually is without testing it. This last paragraph from The Verge also reveals a very interesting tidbit, that they're in talks with Valve and they're constantly having conversations with Valve, but they still believe in Windows and they have a reason to stick with Microsoft's OS, mostly because they want to have inclusiveness for all different game platforms. On one hand, I get it. ASUS just wants other people to be able to play their other games from their other launchers right out of the box without having to do anything that you wouldn't already do in Windows. Given that, you know, it is Windows, it does have better game compatibility than, say, the Steam Deck. especially in regards to anti-cheat titles. But on the other hand, I don't think it's difficult to get non-Steam games working on SteamOS. I mean, I have a variety of different tutorials on that. And if they're concerned with using Steam's own interface, they could always just make their own Linux distribution. It may not be very easy, but they do have a lot of software engineers, so they can figure it out. All in all, this quote-unquote announcement isn't really an announcement. There isn't a whole lot of information out there, and more information will be revealed to us June the 2nd. There are no numbers, there are no hard specs. There's just more than just 40% extra battery life, and more than 16 gigs of RAM. That's all we know for certain about the ROG Ally X. The big question is, would it be worth the upgrade? For those that love their existing ROG Ally, maybe. But this greatly depends on the price of the new ROG Ally X, because it will be more expensive. By how much though? I don't know. Again, no hard numbers, not even on the price. It would be quite the expensive expenditure if I bought an ROG Ally X. If I can't get a review unit, then I'll probably buy it, and then I'll do a review and I'll do a battery test, much like what I did with the original ROG Ally. The increased RAM would make a huge difference when it comes to VRAM intensive workloads. But how much of a difference though? I'm not really sure. I've never used a PC handheld with more than 16 gigs of RAM. What is interesting though is that the ROG Ally X is heavier than the original, whereas the Steam Deck OLED was actually lighter than the original. This might end up being a weird case where the ROG Ally X is heavier than the Steam Deck OLED. But again, we don't have any hard numbers. ASUS's little stream was more or less just an announcement of an announcement, and that big announcement's happening in June the 2nd. Aw man, I'm gonna be on vacation during then. Well, whatever, I'll just bring a smaller mic that fits in my backpack. You know what I want out of an ROG Ally X? USB 4, essentially meaning you could use more affordable GPU enclosures. Other than that though, we know that this is just like a mid-gen refresh, and that ASUS wants to make a true ROG Ally 2, but a more generational leap rather than just an iterative leap. Kind of like what Valve wants to do with an upcoming Steam Deck 2. Wait for a pretty massive performance leap before making a Steam Deck 2. At the very least, this gives ROG Ally users solace that they won't have to buy a brand new one every year just to get the latest processor and just to get a small 10% increase in performance every year. Unlike a certain PC handheld company that's just making PC handhelds left and right everywhere, every year they release like 6 new ones. It's insane. If you like this video, please press the like button and check out our other videos, and if you like those other videos as well, be sure to press the subscribe button and share the good gospel of high-tech lowlife with your friends. Furthermore, we have a community Discord for enlightened individuals such as you. And if you wish to further support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description.